Welcome back, everybody. Kevin, Richard, good to see you. And we're going to be joined tonight by Sherman Hamilton. I'm just actually trying to type the little message on the bottom of the screen for anybody that joins us a little bit later on. Arsh, good to see you. Ryan. Sherman Hamilton is here. Sorry, I'm just writing this little list here, or this little note at the bottom. And we'll get cracking. I don't know if Sherm knows how to join the video, so give me 2 seconds here, and I will invite him in, and we'll get ready to roll here. Pin comment. There we go. And then let's bring Sherm into the mix, and we'll get cracking, folks. Again, thanks for joining in yet again. Midweek. David, nice to see you. Allison, hello. Thanks for tuning in for a moment here. And I've sent the invite to Sherm, so he'll in a second. We'll get ready to crack. Sherm.
Hey.
What's going on, man?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
Good. I appreciate you doing this.
Oh, no problem.
I'm going to dive right in because, I kind of say this off the top every show. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch any of these, and if you haven't, that's fine. But, I'm trying to go big picture here, Sherman, look at people's careers and lives and how they got their start in their sport or in their career, broadcasting or otherwise, and not just talk about current day stuff. So let me bring it back to a young Sherman Hamilton growing up in Malton. And you and I have talked about this a little bit over the years, but when that itch first kind of started to come to you and when you started to scratch that itch in terms of basketball and when you kind of started to gravitate towards the sport?
For me, really, I didn't start playing basketball until grade 6. Messed around with. I played actually hockey was the first sport. Soccer was my first sport. And on your block, you play everything. Whatever your friends are playing, you go out and play. And I just loved to play sports, regardless of what it was. But basketball was something that I played every once in a while with some friends, but I really got serious about it, or really it grabbed me when I was in grade 6. So what are you, about 10 years old, 11 years old at that point?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because at my middle school, Darcel Senior Public School in Malton, big up, they used to roll out this rim, and it was about 8-9 feet tall. And we'd roll it out before school, at lunch, after school, just play as much as we could. So I remember, my brother went to the same school as me. He was 2 years ahead of me. So him and his friends had the rim all the time, and they were playing on the rim. And they asked me to play. It's like, whatever, I'll play. Made a few shots, and they're like, okay, now you're on our team. So I just continued to play. And from that point on, it was one of those games that I didn't feel like I needed to figure a lot out about it. I just loved to play it. And all my friends played it. And we spent hours, endless hours playing. And it started to take away from playing road hockey. It started to take away from playing soccer. It just took away from everything. And before you knew it, I was playing basketball so much. Even though I continued to play on all my sports teams at school, basketball just continued to dominate what I wanted to do. And my friends and I, we were just obsessed with basketball at that point.
Now, you're just a few years older than me, I think 3 or 4 years older. So
we're both April boys.
Yeah, exactly. Couple of Aries.
No.
Oh, no, you're just on the bubble. You're just on the bubble. I apologize. I forgot.
Bubble. I am perfectly into Taurus range. I'm not on a bubble for an Aries.
Well,
I am Taurus through and through.
All right. I apologize. Same month, different, astrological sign there.
There you go.
But I always say for me, and again, I think you and I have probably talked about this at some point over the last, damn near 20 years, for a kid in Canada, especially for a kid that didn't necessarily play at a significant level like you did, it was always hard for me, I found, to be a basketball fan because of the fact that you didn't have a team in your backyard. So, I'm born in 75, but then, when I'm starting to become a sports fan in that range of, 8, 10, 12, when sports really seems to latch on for a lot of young kids, it's the Showtime Lakers, and it's Magic, coming in 79, and obviously the Lakers running roughshod in the Western Conference through the 80s and the 80s basketball between the Celtics and Lakers. For you, you're just a few years ahead of me. Was it tough to ultimately find your way to the sport because you didn't have a lot of exposure to it, or was that part of it, or why do you think it took you to, as you say, grade 6, grade 7 to really kind of latch onto it?
Well, I think for me, the area I lived in Malton, it was a predominantly minority area. And we all played street hockey. We all played, football, but it was tackle without equipment. But the common thing was we couldn't afford hockey, ice hockey. We couldn't afford skates and pads and equipment. Couldn't afford football equipment. Couldn't afford baseball bats and baseballs and gloves. So the sports that ultimately people like me gravitated to were the ones that you just needed the shoes that you were wearing, i.e. soccer, track, and basketball for that matter. If someone had a ball, we could all play. So, even though, I fell in love with basketball, but ultimately hockey was written off for me. And we all know why. It just wasn't designed for people like me back in that time to be able to be successful, to have a chance at the grassroots level to experience hockey. I used to go and play shinny a lot. And it's funny because I'd go there and all these kids would have their gloves and they'd have helmets and they'd have these great skates. My skates had rust on it. I was wearing like winter mittens, a hat that just pulled over my afro. It was funny now that I look back, but I was getting crushed because these guys had all this training and all that. So ultimately for basketball, it was easy to fall into because the group of guys that I grew up with, they were like me. They couldn't afford the other sports. So we just picked up the sports that we just needed what we had on and maybe a ball to play. And, in terms of you talk about the Lakers and all those things, I really wasn't watching basketball at that point. It was one of those things where I just wanted to play. It was a little bit after that where I started watching basketball. And you obviously go back and check out what's the history of the game. But I started to watch basketball after I started playing, and that made it even more fascinating to me to see the Magics and the Larrys and the Isaiahs and the Jordans and the Dr. J's and all these guys. It was just, it was mind-blowing to me. And, from that point on, my love affair with basketball, it couldn't be quelled. And it's interesting, E? The idea of competing in basketball was different than any other sport. There's something about playing basketball with the people I played with that because we were so obsessed with it, if you lost in a road hockey game, you'd always knew who lost because the next day they'd be the first ones knocking on the door because they want to get the stink of the loss off of them. With basketball, there was so much talking and there was so much back and forth that losing wasn't acceptable. You had to play until the dark till you couldn't see anymore. You just didn't want to get off the court. And that kind of attitude towards basketball was something that created a competitive atmosphere that was off the charts at times when I was a kid.
It's funny. I told the story last night when I was talking to Michael Grange, had him on the show, and we were talking about him playing at Mount Allison out east. And I referenced and listen again, Sherm, I'm not here to tell any war stories because I don't have any when it comes to that. But my weekend warrior story, I ended up learning damn near 15, 20 years later what you're talking about when I went to Humber. And you talk about it, as I said to Grange, I'll go to Humber College, and I'm trying to play in pickup games at Humber. And there are a couple games I no doubt held my own, but there were far too many that got my ass kicked as well, trying to play in these pickup games. And just the culture, no doubt, moving from Burlington to Finch and 27. And then I lived in that neighborhood for 6 years, and I never left that area. I lived in residence for a couple of years, and then I stayed in that area in a condo, and then with a girlfriend that I was with at the time for a couple years after that, and just stayed in that area because, as rough as some of the pockets might be, it was a hell of a neighborhood. It was a fun time. You had the mall right there, the Woodbine Center, and JJQs and JJ Mugs, and you had, just zip across Finch to all sorts of different places, let alone just within the campus itself, within that sort of Etobicoke Malton pocket of the sports, whether it be hockey, was it Westwood Arena? That was just up the road, I think, on 27.
Malton Arena got renamed to Paul Coffey Arena.
Yeah. And then, of course, just all the battles that would go on at Humber College in pickup games in rec leagues, let alone the team itself that was at that school. And that's where I think I was kind of schooled on a lot of the stuff that I ultimately learned about the game, just in terms of the culture of the game, more so than just the X's and O's.
Oh, yeah, it was it was live or be killed on some of those courts. And you think about it, at Humber at that point, um, it was a bit more clean. I mean, we're talking
Sure.
about, a time before that where the runs were very, very physical, and they sometimes resulted in a lot of fights. And that was happening at gyms all across the city in terms of those kind of runs. And that's kind of the culture I grew up in. The guys that I went to high school with, we would all load up in a car and we would drive to different gyms. Our starting five and whoever else could fit, we would drive to different gyms and we'd play. And we'd play against whatever five you got, you wanted to play against you guys. And a lot of times it got physical and it got to that point. But the idea of playing with the players that I played with and the people that I grew up around was there was no retreating. There was no steps backwards. It was
Yeah.
always moving forward. And I say this all the time, like, no matter where I've played, the toughest competition I've had in terms of being mentally tough and coming back even after you got, as you said, your ass kicked, was on my block. Was against the guys that I grew up with,
Yeah.
because I was always a small kid. I started high school as 5'3". I wasn't even 100 pounds. So I was always a small kid. And I was always playing against guys that were bigger, more athletic, but I had skill. Whatever sport it was, I had some skill. So
Hmm.
they were going to beat me down. I was going to take the licks. But the idea was, it doesn't matter. You still have to get it done. And that, to me, has stayed with me with everything I do. I mean, it just doesn't matter. But through basketball and what you're talking about, it's, and a lot of times in high school, I was playing against men when I went to these different runs, like at George Brown, and played in the summer league, the Black Circuit Summer League. They had some great tournaments that were very violent at times, but the basketball was so good that you wanted to compete. And it was a time where you didn't really, guys weren't taking off to the States for prep school.
Yeah.
All the best players were staying in the city, and we saw them. If you were a top five high school player, you're going to play against the other top five kids, most likely. And that's the kind of competitive environment that I grew up in. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And you took some shots, but you also started to give some after a little while.
All right. For folks that stay tuned throughout the duration of this, and I hope you do, I want to put a little pin in that comment that Sherm just mentioned about prep school, and at the time it really not being as prominent or anywhere near as prominent as it is now, because I want to go back to that
Yep.
later on, Sherm. When you're coming out, then you find the game at grade 6. You're playing for grade 6, grade 7, grade 8. You're out of grade school now, elementary school. You're going into grade 9. You just said you're 5'3", 100 pounds soaking wet. How tough was it to make the high school team, to make it at a significant level, to stay with the game beyond just playing, pickup games and after school with your buddies and riding around the city looking for games?
I never had a problem making teams, whether it be grade 6, 7, 8, grade 9, 10, 11. I never had a problem making teams. When I left my middle school, there was anticipation of this kid coming to Westwood that was a very good basketball player. And my brother played basketball as well, and he was 2 years older than me. So I got to play basketball with a lot of his friends because he was only 2 years ahead. So when I was in grade 6, I was playing with him and his friends that were in grade 8. So they knew about me. So when I got to high school, I never had a problem transitioning to making any team that I tried out for. And, I was fortunate. I was a pretty good overall athlete. I was just small. So in grade 9, I tried out for everything. I tried out, and funny story about football, I don't know what I was thinking. As small as I was, I don't know what I was thinking. But just to take you off topic for a little bit,
No, that's good.
trying out for the football team, and volleyball was at the same time as football, and I loved volleyball as well. So the gym teacher there is a great man. He's still a friend of mine, Mr. Jonathan Graham. I call him the best teacher I never had because he never taught me a class, but he taught me the most about life throughout my high school career. And to this day, still have a lot of love for the man. And he was a football coach. And he's like, "You're trying out for football?" I'm like, "Whatever, let's go." So I go out to try out for football, and they give you like shell equipment because they don't have your sizes, and we're just trying out. And I had some equipment on, and I was light, so they put me at a wide receiver position and said, "Hey, we're just gonna have you run out, catch the ball." So I ran a pattern they told me to run, and it ended up being like a slant, 5, 6 step up the sideline, cut to the middle,
Yeah.
and I went up and got the ball, and I got blistered with a hit. Totally got ripped, like all my ribs and everything. I literally took the helmet off, took the shoulder pads off,
Yeah.
and left it on that spot and went to the gym and tried out for volleyball. I was done. That was a sport that I was not going to be involved with. And you can call me weak, you can call me soft, call me whatever you want.
I won't. I won't.
I'm just saying that I broke a collarbone playing football on the block with the guys because there's no equipment and it's tackling. And I kept on playing with that, but I was not going to risk getting hit by these guys. And that made my volleyball career much more better when I made that decision.
And I'll say, just as a side, now you've had far worse injuries in your career than I have when we talk about, your back especially. We can get to that a little bit later on. But, man, I was jinxed as a kid, Sherm, or I was just frail and soft, which is probably more accurate because that's probably still accurate to this day. I broke my wrist. I broke my nose. I broke about 5 different fingers. I was a walking wounded for about 4 or 5 year stretch where it seemed like every 8 to 12 months I broke something. I broke my collarbone in grade 6. I cannot think of worse pain than that because when I busted that collarbone, and the only thing they put, I don't know about you, it was this little brace, just this sort of little fabric like harness that comes across your shoulders with a strap across your chest, and they just pull it tight, and you sort of walk like this, but there's no cast, right? So you're just sort of walking like this. I don't know how the hell that's supposed to hold everything in place. And the worst is you go to bed at night on your back, and you wake up screaming in agony because you've rolled onto your side. And oh my God. And to this day, I've got chiropractors and doctors tell me, all this whole knee bone connected to this and that, whatever. They say that my posture, my shoulders, everything is still out of whack because of busting my collarbone in grade 6.
Well, I broke both of my collarbones, at separate times.
Both?
At separate times.
Man.
And here's the funny thing. When I broke my collarbone playing football, I knew I was going to get in trouble. Back then, parents didn't want to have to take you to the doctor, to the hospital for something that happened to you. And my parents are Jamaican. It made it even worse. So I literally, when I broke it, the funny thing was, on my block, you break something, everybody scatters. They run. Nobody's hanging around to see if you're okay. So everybody scattered. And I literally had to limp myself to my house, afraid to tell my parents. So I went to my room and went to sleep. My mother comes to the room and she's like, "Hey, it's dinner time." And like you said, I'm laying there, and once you have to move, it's hell. And I'm screaming. She's like, "What happened?" I told her I go to the hospital. They didn't put that brace on me. They just wrapped me up in a stirrup around my neck, and I was stuck like this. Now, they say that it's supposed to let it heal high because your shoulders are going to drop, so it gives you range of motion. But I was literally walking around like this because, the stirrups they have you in. But breaking the other one later on was even worse because I already knew the pain that was coming. Yeah. So now, to your point, knee bone connected to this, like I'm all out of whack. Both sides have been broken, so at different places, so it's whatever.
So when did you do, if you can remember, when did you do the first and then the second? Do you even roughly, do you remember the age?
I remember doing one at about 11 years old. 11 years old in the summertime. Okay. The other one, I don't really know how old I was. But I was fairly young because I know I was playing at the park and I was running and I dove for something and I caught my collarbone on the corner of wood and the sand and it just broke. But I was definitely under 12 years old by the time I broke both of them.
So part of the reason I asked that then, that didn't affect you in terms of, obviously it didn't. You end up going playing, NCAA ball and national team and overseas and everything else. But did that at any point impact your growth, your shot, your development, any of that stuff? I mean, with your body now being kind of out of whack at a young age and having to recover from, 2 pretty significant injuries.
It's the beauty of youth. I mean, you get injured and all you want to do is play. So you're not even, there's no therapy at that point. There's nothing about
I don't remember
treated. Right. No, we're not getting treated.
A Nerf ball, maybe.
I was just wrapped up and they said it's going to take this long and you waited till this long and then you got back to doing what you did. But no, that never impacted me in terms of what I was doing because I was never really playing basketball like that at that point to be learning how to shoot and stuff like that properly. So it didn't impact my release or anything like that. I mean, for me, the major thing for me was, as you know, I have asthma and I have allergies, which are seasonal and food related. And a lot of times when I'd be playing outside, especially in grass, I'd get an allergic reaction, my asthma would flare up, and I'd have to go home. And I hated having to go home. I did, because once I went home, I'd have to stay home. So
Yeah.
I just fall asleep under a tree and try to just let it go away so I could stay outside and play. But the injuries weren't an issue. It was more just controlling the asthma and the allergies so I could continue to play. I got injured, as you said, you break things, you twist things, you jam things. As long as they're going to heal, you're going to be fine. And the magic of youth, right? It's amazing how quickly we healed.
Yeah, and your body's feeling it still to this day, but
Oh,
at the
yeah.
time, it's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
whatever.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so you're in middle school, and you already have a bit of a name, as you said, in terms of there's a buzz that this young Hamilton kid might be coming along a couple years behind your brother. Then you're into high school, and you're making these teams. At what point now, Sherm, though, does it become there's now a buzz in terms of eyes stateside when schools are now coming to watch, potential of, hey, this kid might have a chance to go stateside? Because, again, it's not as prevalent when you're doing it as obviously it is 10 years ago, 15 years ago, let alone current day. So when does that start, when you really start realizing, man, this could be something for me?
For me, I realized that I had potential in basketball. You know, I thought I was good enough at a very young age to play because I was playing against older kids a lot of times too, right? But in terms of attention, I probably got that really late in high school, maybe grade 11. And
Okay.
that's kind of where I got the recognition as a top 5 high school player in the city. And they expanded it to the metropolitan area as well. And I got fit into that 2 years in a row. And when you get recognized as a top 5 player, even if they haven't seen you, they know your name now. And the basketball community, as you know, even in the world that we're in, it's not as big when you talk about knowing the people that are into the
Yep.
game and that are aware of what's going on. So that spread pretty quickly. And a bigger thing might have been the fact that I played in all those summer tournaments. You know, the fact that I'm going into places like Jungle, I'm going into places in Scarborough and I'm playing, I'm going into Jane and Finch and playing, I'm playing in, there was a Humber tournament in the summertime that was a great tournament. So not only in high school was I playing in my school, I was playing in the summertime against people I wouldn't get a chance to play against or with, which was a lot of fun. So I'd say around grade 11, I started to get looks. And even at that point, I didn't get a lot of looks. Like, I wasn't the guy who was sitting there with a bevy of scholarship offers to sort through. I was kind of trying to cling to a scholarship. I was trying to get someone to, because there's all these conversations early. There's letters. Hey, we heard about you. We're interested. But
Yep.
you find out through the process, unless they write you back, unless there's an additional call, unless there's additional letter. And back then it was letters. I'm that old. It was letters. It wasn't emails. It wasn't all that stuff. But, you know, you realize very quickly that initial letter didn't really mean anything because I got quite a few of those, but I didn't get the follow-up. So it wasn't as smooth as a ride as I'd want it to be.
So when you talk about not having a ton of offers come in, there was more than just one, though. At least the interest was more than just one. Can you give us an idea of some of the other schools that were looking at you and that were showing interest before you ultimately made your decision?
That was so long. You know what? A lot of people don't know this, but I went to a Division II school before I went to VCU, right? You know this, obviously. But at the point I was at, high school was a difficult time for me. As you know, my dad died in high school. You know, there's a couple years in there where it was a difficult time for me kind of figuring things out and staying on the right path and making sure that, you know, my grades were good, that I was focused, that I wasn't getting in trouble because I'm at home and my family is dealing with my dad dying at home. I mean, over a 2-year process. So it was a tough time and nobody really knew it. So there's a lot of times where my schoolwork wasn't keeping up with the grades that I needed. So I think I fell behind quite a bit during those 2 years in terms of the amount of credits that I should have had by grade 12 to the amount that I actually got.
Right.
And so grades became an issue, obviously. But for me, the scholarship offers just started to fall off at that point, and I had to figure out a way to get a scholarship. Because I wasn't going to school at least right away if I didn't get a scholarship. That was just the truth of the financial situation at my house, and that's the way it is for a lot of people.
Sure.
So the initial offers, they started to disappear. Those initial letters, the interest started to die. And even our friend Jack Armstrong, I tell him, you could have recruited me to Niagara. We're just across the border there. And we joke about it all the time. But I just think that at that point for me, it was basically just find a way to get to a school. Because I felt once I got there, I'd be fine. I'd figure out a way to survive. So it ended up being Florida Tech. I mean, at the end of it, they all went away. And I literally was playing in a tournament in the summertime in Montreal. And Andy Russo, who was the head coach at Florida Tech at the time, he was Karl Malone's coach in college. He spotted me and he offered me a scholarship, offered me a visit. And I said, hey, it's D2, but I'll take it. I'll take that scholarship and I'll make the best of it and I'll see where I go from there.
So I'm only going to ask because you brought it up. Respectfully, I didn't want to bring it up, but seeing as you did, Sherman, just one comment or one question about it. Trying to navigate through what happened with your dad and admitting, as you just did, that grade suffering, how difficult was it to focus then on, all right, I know my grades are slipping, but I still will love the sport. I realize the sport could open doors for me, but now suddenly offers are going away. You're trying to focus on all that, realizing if I don't get an offer, I'm not going to school, as you just acknowledged. But then you're also still, I'm assuming, trying to take care of your brother, take care of your mom, be there as a family, whatnot. Mentally, how difficult was that for a young kid trying to grasp all of that life had thrown at you and try and keep it on a fairly straight path?
Oh, it was hard. I mean, we're talking about ages 16 to 18. So there's not a lot of emotional awareness. There's not a lot of communication, and I was going into those tumultuous years where you become a rebellious teen. And I wasn't bad, but you get a bit quiet. You start to develop your own opinions about things. And there's some stress between you and your parents in the teenage years. And it was difficult because here I am, this kid who loves basketball and who has a chance to do something with basketball. And then my world crashes because I get a call. I've got to get to the hospital. My dad's had an accident at work and he might not make it. This is the information I'm told. And this is a call to the school's office that is telling me, because I'm playing pickup basketball in the gym after school, I have to immediately get to the bus, get the bus to the subway to the streetcar to get down to the hospital downtown. And it was one of the most difficult things I'd ever seen, seeing my father in the hospital, unconscious, bloodied up. They waited because they didn't know if he'd make it through surgery. So it was a difficult time, and that completely rocked me. My brother, my sister, my mother, my aunt, my family was great through this. I mean, I don't know how my mother did it, to be honest with you, Eric, but she held us together. Yeah. And she was working, and she made it work for us. And to this day, I tell people, like, I saw her shed one tear through that whole ordeal. Now, that doesn't mean that in her quiet moments, she wasn't doing what she had to do. But in order to be strong for us, I saw her shed one tear. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand how she could be that strong through this process. So my world was rocked. And I'm thinking at this point, I don't know how to handle this.
Yeah.
So I start to get a bit more rebellious. I start to get a bit more impatient. I'm angry more. And all of these elements are being acted out. And I don't even know what's happening. I'm 16, 17, 18 years old. And you don't really know that. My friends were supportive of me because the few that I told were my close friends, and they were great to me. But I just didn't know how to handle it, to be honest with you. I wasn't mature enough. I mean, it's your father. You know what I mean? It's the guy who you look up to, and all of a sudden now you have to help him do everything. And, it did take me away from school because I had to help and stay at home with him sometimes. And until my aunt would come from work, she was a nurse, so she'd get home, get some sleep. Then she'd come over and relieve me at lunch. And then she would be there, and my mother would get home about 2 o'clock, and she'd take a nap, and then she'd relieve my aunt and my brother and my sister. We all chipped in to help out, but it was a pretty quick decline after a little while. And I remember my dad came out, and if I'm getting too deep in this, just tell me to stop. But
No, man,
uh,
I'm enjoying listening. If you care to share, it's up to you, man.
yeah, no, I went. Um, my dad came out of that surgery, and he actually recovered very well. But they said, we don't know when he may relapse. So one of the toughest things, and I have kids now, and you have a kid now, you understand from this perspective. I didn't understand it at that point, but him looking at his kids and saying, if I don't make it through this,
Yeah.
just those words, like, can you imagine saying that to your son? Like, I can't imagine saying that to my daughters and then wondering, what are they going to, like, I may not be here to see them grow. And that was a reality my dad had to face, and he had that conversation with us. And it was heartbreaking. I mean, there was tears all over the place. And he got better, and then unfortunately, I was the one who, he got to the point where he got back to work, and I was the one who unfortunately found him when he went down again. He used to drive me to school in the morning, and excuse me, to basketball practice, because it was at 7 o'clock. He started at
Yeah.
7:15, and he just didn't come outside. And I went back into the house to say, hey, what's going on? And he was just sitting there, and I knew what was going on. I had to call my mother. We called 911, and that was just the beginning of the end at that point. So basketball was the relief for me. It was a chance to get with my friends, play basketball for a few hours. At times, I wasn't really going to class. I was just finding my way to the gym so we could play. And my mother never knew this. Nobody knew this, that I wasn't going to a lot of classes. But I mentioned, and this is tying in that teacher I told you, Mr. Jonathan Graham, who was the best teacher I never had. He was huge to me through this time. I mean, he understood. He took care of me when I wasn't going to class. He'd hide me in his office and just kind of keep me there, because he knows if other teachers saw me, I'd get in trouble. He talked to me a lot. He stayed on top of me. He really, at a time where I needed a male role model in my life, he stepped in a huge way and did a great job of just kind of being there for me. And he did that for a lot of kids. It wasn't just me. He's a great man overall. But I know I rambled. But to your point, it was hard to stick and believe that basketball was going to work out. But at that point, I didn't have much else to believe in. My world was being rocked. My family was being decimated by what was happening to my father. And I just needed something that I could find some joy in. And as you know, on the outside, you're okay. When other people see you, they don't know. But behind closed doors, it was hard. And I mean, I don't know how, but my mother and my family, we were able to get through it. And somehow, some way, I got to the other side.
Sherman, let me ask you this then, and I appreciate you sharing this. And at any point, if you don't want to talk about it, you let me know.
No, this is good.
Was it a bit of a relief to some extent when you ultimately did have a chance to go down to Florida and then go from Florida to VCU? Not to try and imply here by any means that you're shirking duties or you didn't want to be there for your family, but everything you went through, was it almost therapeutic to some extent to get away from that, to get away from family, and not that you're starting over, but just to kind of step back from it and have a bit of a fresh start, perhaps?
You froze for a little bit there, E.
Oh, I apologize. I don't know if that was on my end or your end. I don't know if you heard what I was saying. I was asking how therapeutic was it for you, as much as you wanted to be there for your family, to ultimately have that opportunity to go down to Florida and maybe just kind of step away from everything and have sort of a reset, a restart away from any other family distractions or otherwise, and just kind of reconnect with the game again?
Yeah, I was torn. And, the bottom line was I wanted to get a scholarship. I wanted this basketball thing to work out for me. But the tough part was also I was leaving my mother. You know what I mean? It was really close to just after my father died. And it's interesting because before my 18th birthday, I was given the opportunity to go to Italy and play with a traveling team. And I talked to my mother about it, and my dad he was coming close to the end, and I'm like, I can't go. I can't do this. I can't leave. If he passes and I'm not here, I don't know how I'd handle that. And she told me, she's like, you know what? Go do it. He's gonna hold on till you come back. Go do it. And I went and did it, and he died a month and a half later.
Wow.
And now I'm in the real space of understanding my mother's alone. And I was going on a year after that, and I was like, this is great that I got a scholarship. She was happy for me. She's always wanted me to get that scholarship. But in me, I was kind of torn because I was like, I don't want to leave her by herself. I don't. And I remember writing a letter to her in university and college and saying, I just feel kind of guilty leaving you like this. But she never made me feel guilty. She always said, go do it. And it was never an escape to get away. It was a function of what I had to do if I wanted to achieve my goals. It was just another step in the journey that I had to take in order to have the opportunities that I wanted. So I never really looked at it as escaping because I never wanted to escape it, but I just knew I had to do it. My mother reinforced that I have to do it. I have to get my education, and I have to see where basketball can take me. So yeah, getting away to Florida and doing all of that, it was worrisome at times, but to your point, you're focusing on schoolwork, you're focusing on basketball. And when you're on scholarship, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of your energy. And I guess in a roundabout way, that was a good thing, being so close to my father passing. But my mentality was never to head out thinking
Yep.
that way.
No, I hear you. I hear you. What led to Florida to VCU then? How did that happen? Ultimately transitioning from the D2 to the D1.
So at Florida, I got freshman of the year, second team all conference. So I did well there. And I just didn't feel like I got much better. The only thing I felt like is because you're at a university, they have a dedicated weight program, and you put some body on, some muscle on, and you have skill work. You know what I mean? I just felt like in games, I didn't improve as much as I wanted to from high school to college.
Okay.
And I still had the goal. I felt like I was a D1 player. Rightly or wrongly, that was what I felt about my game. So I knew that I didn't want to stay there, but I didn't have a scholarship to fall back on. So I did a Fred Van Vliet, and I bet on myself. I literally left Florida Tech with no school to go to. Didn't tell my mother, didn't tell anybody. But I left school, and I just said, I'm going to figure this out somehow, some way. And if I don't, I'm screwed. Literally screwed, because, you're giving up a free education just because you think you can do better, you think you can be at another level. Who's going to buy that? You're going to look like an idiot.
Yeah.
So in the summertime, that summer, stuff went crazy with the junior national team program. We can talk about that after, but I was playing with a guy, Simeon Mars, who's Jamal's high school coach, and Simeon, and he went to Kentucky with Jamal and has been a mentor for Jamal almost his whole life. And Simeon took a liking to me, and he put me on a lot of his summer teams, and we'd play for money tournaments. And he'd say, look, don't worry about paying. When we win, you give me my money back. And we'd go win, and I give him and he wouldn't want the money. So you got to figure 16, 17, 18, and you're playing these tournaments, and you're getting money, you're winning. And I said to Simeon, I was like, we were playing in a tournament. I was like, look, man, I gave that scholarship up. I don't have a school to go to, man. And he, at the time, was still coaching at high school, and he coached Mark Hunt. I don't know if you remember that name.
I do remember that name.
And Mark Hunt had just signed with VCU, a letter of intent. So he said, give me a tape. I'll send it to VCU.
Mm-hmm.
He sends the tape to VCU, and it was very quickly. I don't know the time frame, but it was very quickly. I was on a plane to Richmond, Virginia, because Sonny Smith, who was Charles Barkley's head coach at Auburn, said that he wanted me to come in for a visit. So I go in for a visit, and it's crazy how it works. He sets you up with the team, some players from the team. They take you around, show you the campus, they show you around the city and all that. And then I have a meeting with him before I leave. And I walk into his office, shake hands, he stands up, he looks at me, he's like, oh, you're bigger than 6 feet. I want you to come to the school.
Wow.
Just like that. And I was like, I could have played like, oh, we'll see, but I had nowhere to go.
Okay.
I was like, where do I sign? Like, can I sign it right now? And that's basically how I got to VCU, just based
That's
on
wild.
Simeon Mars and
Yeah.
Simeon being willing to use his contacts and actually get me a scholar or opportunity for a scholarship at VCU.
Okay, so you just said it then. Opportunity.
Yeah.
So when did the deal get put in front of you? When did you sign and you know, how did that ultimately come together aside from just sitting there saying, yeah, I'll accept the offer, but to actually get the offer?
Well, I was there for another day after he said that to me,
Yeah.
and I signed it before I left. Before I left Richmond, Virginia, I signed to go to VCU. I wasn't going to let it slide. I wasn't going to give them the opportunity to go see someone else and maybe recruit over me. Let's
Full
get
ride?
this done. Full ride. Full
Yeah.
ride. And
That's wild. That is
yeah,
wild.
get this. And I mean, Florida Tech was a full ride too. So I gave
Yeah.
up a
Yeah, yeah.
full
Oh
ride
yeah.
and could have been out. And I got another offer and I took it. And that's when I could tell my mother what I did. Prior to that, I couldn't tell her
Oh yeah,
anything.
you're dead man.
Oh yeah, no chance.
So, all right, in the midst of that, I don't want to feel like I'm rushing here, Sherman, but this
No,
is I literally, and folks that have been watching this regularly, I say this now almost on every episode. I'm going to have you back for
for
another
sure.
episode, like in a month or something, because we have like 19 minutes left. Like Instagram kicks you out on a hard out at 11 o'clock. You have
Okay.
1 hour.
Okay.
So we have 19 minutes, and we're only in the college years. We haven't even talked about the national team and the Olympics, let alone any Raptor stuff. So we have to do another hour at some point.
Absolutely. By the way, this is
Um,
the first time I've ever used IG Live. As I told you today, this is the first time I've ever used it.
Well, I appreciate it, man. It's
Ah,
your maiden voyage. You're
there
doing
you go.
well.
There you
Doing well.
go.
All right, you just touched on it, so I'll let you tell the story then. You mentioned, junior national team, a lot of stuff going on. We'll get to that. So let's get to it then. At what point, and I know we've missed some of the chronology here, kind of going from high school to Florida to VCU and whatever, but when does the connection with the national team, whether it be junior or senior, when does it start for you? When do you get into the program, and what's some of this stuff you're talking about?
So it started way back in high school. So
Yeah.
back then, I don't know if you remember, there used to be JDP, MDP, and those kind of programs in the Ontario programs. So I believe, in grade 10, and a letter comes to my high school, Westwood Secondary School, and they say, hey, you've been identified as one of the top 100 players in the province. Cool. We're having a camp, identification camp. It'll cost $100. Hey, can you hear me? Okay, no worries, no worries. I stopped talking anyway.
All right.
So cost $100 for this identification camp, and they wanted me to come. I take it home to my parents, and it's not happening. We just didn't have $100 to send me to camp, and so that same teacher, Jonathan Graham, was the one who gave me the letter. So he asked me a couple of days later, "Hey, what's happening with the camp?" And I was kind of sheepishly embarrassed to say it, but I told him, I was like, "Well, we just can't afford it. I'm not going to be able to go." He literally pulled out his checkbook right there and wrote a check for $100 in his office and gave it to me and said, "You're going to the camp." So that was my first introduction to the Ontario program. So I played in the JDPs, the MDPs. I don't even know the order of them at this point, but I played in all of those things. And I got to the point where I eventually got national team recognition by playing for the junior national team. And it's interesting because while I was at Florida Tech, it was a term system. So we had 3 terms. It wasn't 2 semesters. So it ran a bit later into the year. So we finished around end of May with the 3 terms. Well, the junior national team tryouts and stuff are like in May, but I was at school. So I got them while I was at Florida Tech. I got them to push my exams up so that I could take my exams to get back to tryout.
Yep.
Tryout, make the team, come back to school to finish up exams. They call me while I'm at school and say, "Listen, we know school's going to end in about a week and a half for you, but we just feel like we we should give your spot to guys who have been here the whole time. And, we appreciate what you did, but we just don't feel comfortable seeing you've been away for so long. And I lost it. I
Yeah.
lost it on them. I was like, how you made me or asked me to push what if I failed these exams? I pushed them all up so I could get this stuff done. There was one exam I had to go back for after the trial. And now you're telling me all of that was for nothing? So I was literally done with the program. Before I even got introduced to it, I was done with it. I was so upset with it. And that's the summer that I met Simeon. And it kind of works out because if I was playing for that program, I wouldn't have been able to hook up with Simeon, and I wouldn't be able to get the
Right.
scholarship. So it ended up working out. But that was one of the things, like through the Ontario programs and getting recognition. I mean, through that Ontario program, on the Olympic team that I played on, there's about 5 or 6 of us that were in that pool of Ontario North, East, South players that eventually made it to that Olympic team. So it was a hotbed of talent during that time for eventually that 2000 Olympic team.
So, Sherm, at what point, though, then did you come back to the program and feel comfortable doing so after kind of getting, essentially screwed over or seemingly screwed over by them, no doubt, to have the trust to ultimately say, all right, I will play for Canada again. I will put on the red and white. How difficult was that for you, and when did that happen?
So in '93, Ken Shields was the coach of the national team.
Yep.
And now I'm back. I've played 1 year at VCU, and I sat out the year, actually. I didn't play because in the transfer rule, you had to sit out for 1 year. So I just worked out with the team, practiced with the team, but I couldn't travel, couldn't play any games. And got in maybe too big, but got muscularly big, and went and tried out for the national team. And we're trying out at Humber College, and I was in the tryouts and I was doing whatever, and I was doing, I thought, fairly well. And at these tryouts, these coaches really talk to us. And I ended up diving for a loose ball in the tryout. By the end of the night, I couldn't even take the bus ride that we took back to the dorms. So for the next 2-3 days, I continued to try out on the back, and I ended up, as you know, I blew a disc in my back during that time.
Yeah.
And I was trying to get help. I was trying to get medical help. I was talking to the trainers there, and there's a lot of players there, but I'm trying to say, look, something is really wrong with my back, and I need some help here. And yeah, just put some ice on it and all this stuff. And I couldn't get any help. The team, now remember, this is a time where the team, they picked their team, and now they're still training in the area. I'm still trying to get help. Can you direct me to somebody? And I'm kind of getting thrown off. And Ken Shields, and this is one of the things that bothered me, he said to me, and I didn't think he had any interest in me. He says, too bad you hurt your back. It really would have been great to have you on the team. And I'm like,
Of course.
You're
Yeah,
full
of
of
course.
crap. You're full of crap right now. I just made it easy for you to not have to talk to me. And but he was a great coach for the national team program. He just had his flaws, as many coaches do. And yeah, I ended up having surgery, and I was just so bitter about the treatment and how now I have to have surgery, and I have to tell my coach this. And I just got off of my year of sitting out, and I'm about to play, and I got to tell him I have to have back surgery. If he rips up my scholarship, what do I do?
Yeah.
So now I'm really worried about what's happening. So I had that surgery July 5th, and I was back playing by September 15th. Now,
That's crazy.
yeah, when I had the surgery, doctors saying it's 6 months to a year before you can get back to doing anything. I told them, just do the surgery. I can't deal with that right now. So I got back on the court way too early. My sciatic nerve was still damaged, playing on numb toes in my first year back playing. And I was playing in the Metro Conference with teams like Louisville and Tulane, and I was getting destroyed. I don't know how Sonny did not say, you just can't do this anymore. We're moving on. But he
Right.
stuck with me. But at that point, I was done with the national team program. I told everybody, like, in no uncertain terms, you guys are idiots. I can't believe that I tried to play for your team and you couldn't even help me get any help for my back. And they had a coaching change that summer. And Steve Konchalski became the coach. And great coach from St. FX out in Antigonish,
Yep.
Nova Scotia, and just a great guy. And he just called me at VCU, and he said, listen, I know what happened. I understand how you feel, but things will be different. And I said, Coach, I really have no interest. I literally was going to shut him down and hang the phone up. And he's like, just listen to me. Coach K understood. There was a few issues with the national team at that time. There was an issue of, I think, diversity, where there wasn't a lot of minority players that were getting the opportunities that they felt they deserved. And it became kind of that unspoken black eye on the program. It was kind of under the surface, but everybody was aware of it. And he spoke to that specifically, saying that's going to change. We're going to take the best players and we're going to put them on the team. And he said, as for you, I understand what happened. But if you come back to the tryouts, I guarantee you, you will get a fair shake. And there's something about a man, he didn't have to call me specifically. There's a lot of players in the country that he could have picked from, and it didn't have to include me. But just the fact that he took the time out to call me and have that conversation with me, that's something I never experienced from a coach in an Ontario program or the national team program. So that was great. And I went back and I tried out, and I eventually made the team and had success. And with Coach K, with the group of guys, that eventually he was the one, and he doesn't get enough credit for this, but he was the one who put that core group together of guys that represented the national team in the 2000 Olympics. Jay was the coach at the time.
Yeah.
But he inherited the guys that Coach Konchowski handpicked and said, I think this guy fits, this guy fits, this guy fits, and put that group together. And we took some ass kicking, but we learned from it. We got better eventually to be able to make that 2000 Olympics. So that's kind of how I got back into the program, all because of Coach K. Great man, great coach, and I appreciated everything he did for me.
Well, and I give you credit as well, Sherm. I've heard bits and pieces of the story, but not in the detail that you just gave. To think about where you went with, as you said, with the Ontario basketball folks, to then Canada basketball, then the health stuff, and then Coach Shields, to then Konchowski, to then Triano, to the point where, you know, a little more than a decade after you're falling out, where you think you're not even going to ever play for the program again. You're now also coaching for the program on top of that. You've not only represented at an Olympics, but now you're in the program. And I know you've had opportunities over the years as well to potentially even work in an even bigger role with the program. So that to me says something about you, as you just kind of touched on, maybe the character that you show in terms of giving a new person, a new man, a new coach a fair shake, in spite of the fact that you certainly got, you know, given the raw end by somebody else. I mean, that's, to me, impressive on your behalf. We only got a couple minutes left. It probably doesn't do it justice, but to go from then coming back to the team, making the team, as you said, having some success and taking some beatings under Coach Konchowski, then all of a sudden you are in the Olympic Games. You're in the backcourt with Steve Nash. I don't know. I can only speak to the Olympics as a broadcaster for one Olympics and otherwise a fan for every other Olympics. What was that experience like on that level, putting on the red and white?
It was unbelievable. And I'll go back to the year before when we qualified for the Olympics. We went to Puerto Rico, and back then it was only 2 teams that qualified from the Americas. And one of those spots, the Dream Team already had. Yep. So everybody else was fighting for one spot to go to the Olympics. There was no tournament the next summer where you had a chance to qualify again. It was one shot and it was done. So us getting through Puerto Rico and qualifying in that scenario was almost as gratifying, to think that nobody believed we could do it and we actually got it done. But there's something about the Olympics and the pre-Olympic ceremonies, the walk-in parade, and then the first game. Now, remember, we're playing against Australia, the home team, the first game.
Yeah.
Like, that's supposed to be an easy L. You know what I mean? Like, amped up, the fans are hyped for their country, and we're supposed to take that L. And Australia was a good team. But we were able to win that first game, and, you know, we just all played well. And obviously we're led by Steve and his amazing abilities, but, you know, you got to fill in the gaps. And I thought our team played extremely well and weren't rattled by the moment. But, you know, there's one thing about the Olympics that I realized. you just don't know how many people support you and the team until you're in it. And you're getting emails from people and they're saying, go do it for our country. And you don't know what they look like, but there's all these people that are supporting you. And it was just amazing to feel that. And, country pride is something that we talk about, you know what I mean? It's singing the national anthem and things like that, or something happens in our country and we all, nowadays, we send all the love we can and the respect and the support via social media a lot. But being in the middle of it and then seeing it all come towards you is a very different thing. And it really, it kind of brings it full circle in terms of this is why you do it. You do it for your country. You do it because this is where you want to be. And it was kind of mind-blowing, but you don't have time to really sit in that because we're preparing to play in the Olympics. We got Australia the first game. So as much as we enjoyed the opening ceremonies and you're walking in with the big camcorders, not your little things that you have now, the big one, and you're throwing it around. And another thing, the great thing was my mother actually saw me, pick me out in the crowd on TV, me walking around the camp. So for her and the people that knew me and grew up with me and helped me get there and were a part of my life, it was just as satisfying. So it was a pretty amazing experience.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, I think I just saw your brother's name scroll by here on the list, watching. So you almost took the words out of my mouth, or at least the question out of my mouth. I was going to say, how much in that moment were you thinking about brother, sister, mother, and more so even your dad looking down on his son in the Olympic Games and the journey that you'd been on to get to that point?
Yeah, and obviously you think of everybody, everybody that's been a part of your life and that has helped you in whether it be a big way or a little way to get to the point you're at. And one thing Jay did was he made us write letters to 3 to 5 people that we felt were integral in terms of us being able to achieve our goals. So we picked whomever we wanted, you know what I mean? It's a good reflection period to have in that moment. But yeah, my family, they were supportive the whole time. Coaches that I played for, friends, everybody that was associated with me were very supportive. And I just can't imagine if social media was around now, how much more felt that support would be with everything that people can do with, video calling and all that stuff. But
yeah,
in those moments you reflect and you realize that as fortunate as you are to be in the Olympics, you worked pretty hard to get here. You put a lot in, you sacrificed a lot. So this is both of those worlds coming together, and it was a pretty overwhelming thing at times, but we're built as athletes and we had to compete and we had to get ready and we're practicing, training. This was the moment, so we couldn't let it slide based on emotion. So you do definitely, you are aware of it, you just don't let it overtake you because you got to do your job.
All right, Sherm, I'm going to end it right here because we got about a minute, maybe 90 seconds left, and I don't want to get kicked off in the middle of a sentence or something. And this maybe is a perfect end because we just did an entire hour and didn't talk at all about the Toronto Raptors, which is absolutely fine. But that sets up maybe part 2 perfectly, where we can talk about you transitioning from the playing career and ultimately into the broadcasting career. And you and I go back now almost 20 years when you started doing stuff on radio and then at Raptors TV then at the time. So that'll be a perfect transition. So I'll bug you again in another month or so. I mean, assuming we're still in lockdown, hopefully we're actually back calling some games soon, and I'm maybe not doing the show. But as long as this show's going on, as long as the lockdown's going on, I'm going to be doing guests every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we'll get Sherm back on, and we'll talk some Raptors, and we'll continue on his journey as we're sort of almost at the halfway point of his life now. We still got a lot to do. But Sherm, I appreciate this, the honesty and speaking from the heart and sharing some personal moments and whatnot. I really respect that and appreciate it, and I think a lot of the viewers did as well. So thanks for this, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Be safe, and hope everyone in your family is doing well. And, yeah, let's do it again. Look forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Sherman. And everybody, thanks for tuning in. And we'll be back again tomorrow night. Chuck Swirsky's going to join me. But, again, Sherm Part 2 in the very near future. Good night, everybody. Thanks. Stay safe.